And now, from beyond our dimension, this is the JeffMara podcast. Here's Jeff.
My guest is Dr. Bruce Goldberg, who has advanced degrees in dentistry and psychology, as well as being a hypnotherapist for over 50 years. Today, we're going to be talking about spirit guides and how to contact them. Dr. Bruce, welcome back. It's nice to see you again.
Well, it's nice to reincarnate with you again, Jeff. This is going to be a very interesting interview in the sense that I'm going to be bringing up things that your audience most likely have not been exposed to. I like to educate people, and I'm a very detailed person when it comes to presenting this in an organized way, but in a metaphysical way, and showing them how they can be what I call psychically empowered is the key term.
That's great. Well, what's the difference between a spirit guide and an angel?
Now, this has been confused a lot over the years. Now, you understand that an angel is a direct messenger from God. It is a perfect being that was never human. It's an angel. By the way, they don't have wings, so forget about that concept. That's Hollywood. So an angel is a direct messenger, perfect entity, perfect energy. And what they do is they help us, of course, but they don't want you to be codependent on them. They can have a sense of humor. They can actually act somewhat human in a way, as far as the way they try to relate to you on your level. They can, of course, read your mind, but they are not human, never have been. And they don't work with people. There aren't that many, I should say, there aren't that many angel contacts as compared to spirit guides, as you'll see. So they're a relatively rare experience, and they usually like to work with group things rather than just one-on-one. Yes, you can have like a guardian angel kind of thing, but most of the contacts people have with fifth dimensional entities are going to be with spirit guides. Now, a spirit guide is very different than an angel. A spirit guide, it was human. Now they're in between lives. They're more spiritually evolved than us, therefore they can assist us, right? And you probably have known them in past lives. That's not uncommon. They can do that. It could be a departed relative, can do that. It could be a religious figure, a Jesus, a Buddha, whatever, that kind of thing. But most of the spirit guides are just beings who are more evolved. They have been with you, so they know you, and you know there's a relationship. Not always, but they were human, and they will be human again. They're not perfect. They haven't ascended yet. They're staying, but they're much more evolved than us. So they have a shorter karmic cycle. When you see a spirit guide, they very often wear the outfits of their favorite past life. So you may see a guy dressed in a Roman toga or a Renaissance outfit. That is because that's just who they are. They just like to identify with their most enjoyable and maybe the life that they had with you, too. That's another reason.
Do they stay with us our entire life, or do we switch them out?
Now, that's a very good point. So you have, let's say your spiritual evolution is at a certain level. Let's say it's lower than it should be. That's why we have a karmic cycle. So you have about a dozen spirit guides. By the way, all these spirit guides are brought into by your higher self. So if you want to contact a spirit guide and you want to get to the higher self, is the one that will assign that. Right. So before I do that, let me just make a notation for the audience. If your audience orders my book from my site, Spirit Guide Contact Through Hypnosis, they will get a free CD with it only if they mention the show, and that will allow them to access a spirit guide. The other book is Exploring the Fifth Dimension. If they mention that book with the show, then they will get the fifth dimensional travel CD with that. So they can do this themselves other than just reading about it. Now, as you evolve spiritually, let's say you grow, you have these dozen spirit guides, and I'll go into the details of what kinds they are. Then you are now more evolved than you were before. So now you're going to get a new bunch of spirit guides working for you. You're going to get higher level ones, and you go up the ladder, so to speak. This is like Jacob's ladder here. You go up the ladder as you grow spiritually. Now, as far as the types of spirit guides, generally there are, remember, there's a whole bunch of them. You get about a dozen of them at one time. The higher self is always the key. So you get abundance guides, you get relationship guides, they will do that for that particular category. But the real specific ones, and this is the fun part, we call them chemist guides. And the chemist guides deal with your body biochemistry. So if you have some disease, including, by the way, even incurable diseases, spirit guides can help you. At times they will. Not always, but they can. Then there's the doctor guide, as we call that. That is the one who deals with the mental or emotional problems, anxiety, depression, obsessive compulsive disorder, things like that. Then you have the gatekeepers. Now, the gatekeepers are dealing with psychic protection. This is a biggie because you got the lower astral plane, which is the origin of psychic attack, and everybody's attacked by lower astrals. If you're protected, no problem, but most people aren't. But the gatekeepers are the ones that will seal the auric field that surrounds the physical body. And if it seals it, negative energy cannot get through, and therefore you're protected. And the higher self, of course, will assist it. The message guides are the ones that give you psychic gifts, telepathy, things like out-of-body experiences, teleportation. That's a real biggie. Any of the psychic gifts of intuition that people refer to that, those are the message guys. And then there are the masters. These are the perfect beings, like the Arcturians, for example, would be an example of that. Or the religious figures, the Jesuses, the Buddhas, things like that, that will assist you more in time of need on bigger picture, more important items. Now, there also are ETs involved. Now, we're talking about the fifth dimension. So there are positive, not the grays, not the reptilians. Forget about that, folks. The good ones like the Pleiadians, the Arcturians, and the Sirians are ETs that are extremely positive. Now, why would you contact, or why would the higher self bring in an ET? Because they have certain healing techniques that the spirit guides don't have, and the higher self itself doesn't do. So the ETs will be another subspecialist. So that's what that means. So those are things that you're dealing with in the spirit guide panorama.
So you are saying that these ETs can be our spirit guides.
Well, the ETs, remember, these ETs are only brought in. They're a minority guide, so to speak. They're only brought in when they are absolutely necessary, meaning that there's a certain technique that they do very well that nobody else does. So then you call in the subspecialists, and that would be the ETs. Now, most people will not remember that. When they have the spirit guide contact, they pretty much blank it out because most of this occurs in the dream levels at night when you're out of the body in the REM cycle. But the spirit guides, if they want you to know who they are, they will identify, they'll give you a name, and they'll say, this is the best time to communicate with us. 2:00 in the afternoon on a Wednesday, whatever, they will do that. They will let you know. Most of the time they don't, because they don't want to interfere with your life. They don't want you to be obsessed with them. And they want you to go on and do your karmic cycle and learn your lessons and take care of your family or profession, whatever you're doing on the earth plane.
Are spirit guides with us 24 hours a day or only when we need them?
No, it's basically when you need them. They have, remember, the spirit guides deal with many other people. So they're not going to just sit there waiting for you to observe you. They will deal with other people. The higher self is the one that calls them in. So a lot of patients of mine over the years, they've been through all kinds of programs. They've been very frustrated about trying to access spirit guides. And I say, look, if you're just trying to access a spirit guide directly, I don't care what technique you're using. It's not very efficient. The higher self is what you want to do first, because the higher self brings in the spirit guide. And that's why I do my superconscious mind tap technique that I developed like over 50 years ago to train people to connect with the higher self. And then you ask the higher self for a spirit guide contact. Or the higher self would just give it to you because it can read your mind. So the higher self is everything. If you do that, you're going to have a lot more success.
What are the advantages of contacting your spirit guides?
Now, the advantages of spirit guide contact are many. Obviously, healing, abundance. If you have financial problems, if you want to improve, I call this karmic capitalism. A spirit guide can do that too. If you want a relationship, if you want to meet a soulmate, that kind of thing. Spirit guides also identify and establish the fact that there's no such thing as death. That when you cross into spirit, you're just changing dimensions and you're going to reincarnate. So it helps eliminating bereavement. Spirit guides can deal with any kinds of habitophobia, physical, emotional, and spiritual growth in your life, psychic protection, of course, developing psychic gifts, as we talked about with the message guides, for example, further connecting you to your higher self, helping you to work out what I call astral negotiation, where if you've got a problem with people on the earth plane, could be a family member, it could be a employee or employer, or it could be a neighbor. The spirit guides, along with the higher self, you can build up what we call a sanctuary, and you can summon the soul of the person who's causing you problems, and they will come. They have to come, by the way. They don't have to stay, but they have to show up. And they're accompanied by their higher self, like their lawyer, so to speak. And then you can communicate with them, and they're much more open-minded in the fifth dimension in your sanctuary. And then you can work out the differences. And then when they wake up the following morning, they don't know what happened. They just wake up like they normally do. And all of a sudden, they have a different attitude towards you. Isn't that interesting? And that's called astral negotiation. This is a very ancient art. It goes back to the mystery schools thousands of years ago. So spirit guides can assist you with that. They can help you. There's another aspect. This is kind of interesting. So let's say a person is very physically compromised. They're paralyzed, or just they can't do anything. They're almost a vegetable, but they miss relationships. So you can have an astral lover. A spirit guide can actually help people develop their intimacy, overcome intimacy issues, or if they're normal human and don't have a problem, but they're in between relationships, they can help them to bridge that gap until they introduce them to someone on the earth plane that would be a partner, potential, male or female, whatever the person is. So spirit guides can do that. It's very interesting.
It sounds like to me that you're saying that really we need to learn how to contact our higher self, and our higher self will bring in the appropriate guide.
Right. Think of the higher self as a general practicing physician. You go to your local doctor, he's a GP. He's not a neurologist, he's not a kidney specialist, he's not a lung specialist, but you got a problem with your kidney. Right? What does he do? He refers you to a kidney specialist, a nephrologist, right? Whatever the specialty is. So the higher self, now the higher self does healing too. Let's not underrate that. The higher self comes from the God energy complex. It is the perfect part of you. Remember the ascension mechanism, which is the only reason why we're here. When you cross into spirit or clinically die, you want to merge with your higher self. That's atonement. When you merge with your higher self, you eliminate the karmic cycle, and then you can be a spirit guide yourself, or you can ascend into the higher planes and rejoin with the God energy complex from whence we came. So the higher self is the key. You're right. Absolutely. Higher self contact first. We call that the superconscious mind. And that's why all my patients, I deal with the superconscious mind tap. And then the higher self, you can ask your higher self whatever the issue is. Higher self knows, can read your mind, but it's always wise when you go to sleep at night, say, I want to connect with my higher self, and this is what I'd like to work with. That's it. Just say that, and then go to sleep. Everything else, you're going to be trained to go to the upper astral plane, not the lower. The lower is the origin of the psychic attack. And you're going to create a sanctuary, which is like a conference room on the upper astral. It could be whatever you find comfortable. It could be a Greek temple. It could be an outdoor scene. It could be a woods, or whatever you feel comfortable. And then your higher self will bring in the appropriate spirit guides.
Well,
And sometimes even the ETs, and sometimes even time travelers from our future, which we'll deal with in another interview. They can bring those people in too, to assist you in whatever the goals are. Your specific goals will determine which specialist you get.
well, how do we prevent ourselves from going to the lower astral plane and protect ourselves
Okay,
from
now
these
let me
dark
define the difference
entities?
here first. The, when you connect with your higher self, now people talk about the white light. The white light is actually your higher self, but the higher self can manifest itself in any way. Once you deal with the higher self, and when I work with my patients and the CDs I was telling you about that goes with the Spirit Guide book and the Exploring Fifth Dimension book, there's going to be a spiritual protection exercise before I do the actual exercise. So once you do that, you can't go to the lower astral plane. You only go to the lower astral plane when you take recreational drugs, when you argue with your spouse, or do something stupid or fail a karmic test. Then you're going to go to the lower astral plane. So or listen to too many negative news items, that kind of thing. You don't want to do that. But drugs are a no-no. That's a real no-no. Don't, for the benefit out there in podcast land, never use recreational drugs when you're using my CDs. because, or any technique, meditation, whatever you want to talk about, you're going to go to the lower astral plane. So let's differentiate. How do you know that you're dealing with a spirit guide or a lower astral entity? That is a very critical thing to know. Let me show you the reason. So when you're dealing with a spirit guide, they're going to always give you uplifting information. They're going to respect God. They're not going to make fun of God. They're not going to. They're going to encourage you to have free will. In other words, they're not going to dictate to you. They're not going to say, this is what you do and ignore everybody else but me. No, they're going to help you. They're going to help you in the various techniques we talked about with the different types. They're going to refer you back to your higher self. Everything is positive. Everything is spiritual. They're an advisor. It's sort of like the Senate advising the president on a nomination. They're not going to control you or dictate. Now, so everything is positive. You're going to have good fortune. You could say good luck. There's no such thing as luck. It's either positive energy or negative energy. Everything is energy. So that's a spirit guide. You're going to feel good. You're going to sleep well. Everything is fine. Now, if you go to the lower astral plane, you won't know that initially. And there's an entity who's trying to say, I'm your spirit guide, but he's not. He's a lower astral. So what do? Number one, they represent really negative energy. They will use foul language. They will make fun of God. They will try to have you almost like a cult leader. They will say, you listen to me. Everything you've ever heard is wrong. I am the man. You just shut your pie hole and listen up. That's what they're going to do. You're going to have bad luck. You're going to have nightmares. You're going to have things in your life are going to be very much negative. Like in a typical month, you might have 5 things that go wrong with your life. If you have a lower astral, you may have 30 things going wrong. Okay, people call that bad luck, negative energy. You can have depression, thoughts that like to harm yourself or others. That's a real serious issue. That's what they do. They're just evil entities. They're like demonic entities. Now, they can't physically hurt you. They can just create anxiety and codependency if you're dumb enough to follow it. So big difference. What they can't do, now they can read your mind, so they know who you are. They know what your wishes are. They know what your fears are. But what they can't create is a positive emotional state. All they can create is fear. Whereas a spirit guide or the higher self, unconditional love. That's what they do. So if you feel bad about something, if you feel anxious, you know it's not a spirit guide. Even if you don't remember any of these other characteristics, it's a matter of your emotional state of mind. Positive is spirit guide or higher self. Negative is lower astral.
What do you think about channeling? Do you think some of those people are channeling lower astral entities?
Okay, so in my career, I feel like almost like Houdini in a way. Let me show you what I mean. When Houdini was very close with his mother, and when she died, he went to spiritualists at that time. This is over 100 years ago, trying to connect with her because he was really, he wanted to see how she was doing, what's going on, what is death like. And what he did was he went to a lot of spiritualists, channelers, psychics, whatever, and he found out that almost all of them were phony. He exposed them, and he was very good at it, very smart guy. Now, as far as channelers, mediums, or psychics, there are real talented people. Yes, I have met them and I've tested them because I never discuss my own past lives. I say, go ahead, read me if you're so good. And most of them have no idea what's going on. They're obviously scammers. So most of them, like 90 to 95% of them are phony, but there are real ones. So if you want to meet a real one, into channeling or a psychic medium, whatever, ask your higher self to connect you with one. Okay. Your higher self is not going to give you a phony. But basically, the reason why I don't like the concept of channelers and medium, it's not that, even if you're dealing with the real one, I don't want you to be codependent on Madame Zelda here. I want you to be psychically empowered. Do it yourself. That's why you have a higher self. You don't need, like any practitioner for a long time. When I work with my patients, I say, look, I'm short term with you. I'm not going to be with you. You're not going to come here for the rest of your life. You're going to come here for a minimal amount of time until I train you to connect with your higher self and the spirit guides through the higher self. And then you're on your own. You do your own thing. I don't want codependency, but unfortunately, channelers and medias do. They want you to come in there every week and whatever, And so they are real, but again, it's a low percentage. And it's not something that you need because a channeler or a medium It's almost like an inexpensive therapist when you think about it. The people who go there, a lot of them are lower middle class. They don't have a lot of money. They can't afford to go to a real therapist. So they go to a psychic or a medium or a channeler. And what they're doing is reading the Akashic records. That's the bottom line. If they're real, the Akashic records is like a fifth dimensional computer chip that has memories of your past, present, future, and parallel lifetimes. It's stored on the causal plane that's beyond the astral plane. So if they're real, that's what they're reading. If they can't read it, then they're phony. They don't know what they're doing. So when I do a regression or progression with a patient, they're accessing their Akashic records. How do they get the information? Because in the fifth dimension, all time is simultaneous. So that's why you could see the future, or the past, or parallel lives. But the Akashic records are the bottom line to what a real, understand the word real, channeler or medium or psychic taps into. And they can't make it up. I mean, you can always test them, you know. So anyway, I like I say, I believe in taking charge of your life, psychic empowerment, using the soul's level, the subconscious or soul, to become empowered, remove fear, and be able to attain any goal you want that you deserve. That you're part of your karmic cycle that will be assisted by the higher self. So the higher self is much better than the channel. That's what I'm saying.
How do we connect with our higher self?
That's very simple. That's the superconscious mind tap. Now, the CDs that come with the two books I mentioned, they will guide you into the fifth dimension. And when they do that, you're automatically going to be where your higher self is going to be contacted. In other words, you're in the fifth dimension and you're sending out like a requisition, so to speak, for your higher self. And your higher self is going to say, oh, okay, you're in my turf now, a fifth dimension, upper astral plane. Could be other dimensions, but usually it's the upper astral. And the higher self will communicate with you as long as you do the techniques and just, as long as you follow the very simple instructions. You don't have to do anything. It's all on the CDs. If you meditate, if you're concentrating on a mantra, in whatever meditative technique you're doing, you just send a request to meet your higher self. The higher self is there, but it won't contact you unless you request it. Okay, you have to follow the rules of the universe. It's not going to take over your life because your higher self could make you perfect anytime it wants. It can say, okay, merge with me, let's go, we're out of here. It doesn't do that. You got to earn it. These are the karmic tests that we have to pass. We have a karmic cycle. So you have to play by the universal laws. These are natural laws, not man-made laws, not religious laws, not secular laws. These are natural laws of the universe.
Well, you're saying that the higher self is in the fifth dimension. What other entities or beings are there as well?
Now, the higher self is in the fifth dimension. And when I use the term fifth dimension, I'm referring to, let's define that, the three-dimensional world that we live in, length, width, and depth or breadth. Then beyond that is the fourth dimension. And please, out there, folks, this is science. Fourth dimension is an artificial concept for time. It's not a real dimension. You don't have entities in the fourth dimension. They always talk about the fourth density. Trust me, the fifth density, not the fourth, okay? So the fourth dimension is used by physicists to just for the mathematical equations that we use in string theory and theory of relativity, etc. So the fifth dimension includes things like the different dimensions: astral, beyond the earth plane; the causal, where the Akashic records are kept; the mental plane, where the masters hang out, the Jesuses, the Buddhas, etc. The etheric plane. So those five dimensions make up the karmic cycle: etheric, mental, causal, astral, and the physical. Now, we live in the fifth dimension. We just can't see beyond three dimensions with our senses, unless you're in a hypnotic level. Then you're now in the fifth dimension. You see, I call that an IBE, in the body experiences. It's like an out-of-body experience, except your perception is from the physical body rather than your ceiling. So we do live in the fifth dimension, but again, our senses are only, our five senses can only detect the three that are relevant to the earth plane. Now, as far as the different entities, now, when you're in the fifth dimension, there are lots of entities you can meet. Somebody's having a near-death experience. They're clinically dead for 2 or 3 minutes. Where do they go? Fifth dimension, probably the astral plane. Let's say spirit guides can hang out there. Your higher self can hang out there mostly. It can go to any dimension. But usually it hangs out in the upper astral because that's where most people go 90% of the time. You can get ETs. I mentioned the Pleiadians, Arcturians, Sirians. If you go to the lower astral plane where you don't want to go, you can meet Greys and Reptilians, and you don't want to meet them. Trust me. You can meet masters, the Jesus, the Buddhas, that kind of thing, the Moses, whatever. You can meet, let's say, time travels from our future that we'll talk about more next time. They travel through the future to the present, to their past, our present, by going through the fifth dimension, right? So they do that too. And a departed relative, a departed pet, they have souls too, okay? Those are the kinds of people that or just an astral voyager, I call that. Somebody also practicing an out-of-body technique, just like the people using my CDs would be doing. They're just floating around saying, hey, I'm using these techniques too. You want to have lunch? So those are the kinds of entities. Rarely an angel. That would be very rare. You can meet them, but usually not. They don't like to. They don't hang around. They usually come to the earth plane, actually, do their thing. But again, the most important entity in the fifth dimension is your higher self. Always, the higher self is numero uno.
Let's say you connect with your higher self. How does it connect with the spirit guides?
Okay, so the higher self is, remember, it comes from the God energy complex. So think of it as a dispatcher for a cab company or Uber or Lyft. And the higher self says, okay, you need an abundance guide because you got a mortgage due or you got some financial problems. So what they do is they send out the energy. Remember, it's sort of like a computer system in a way. It's a little different than us. And they'll say, let's see who's on the list for an abundance guide that represents your spiritual level of development. Remember, if it's too high, you're not going to work with them. You have to get somebody who's on your level, somebody who's relevant to you. Later on, of course, you'll get a more advanced one. So he goes to his little, Rolodex, whatever you want to call it, and he picks out an abundance guide that's relevant to your development, and he communicates him and says, got a minute? Could you assist us here? And the spirit guide will, they travel the speed of light. They come there and they, next thing you know, you've got a contact with the spirit guide. Most of this will be in the dream levels at night during the REM cycle. Because when you go to sleep at night, you're in the REM cycle for 3 hours a night minimum. This is 70 years of research, medicine-wise. There's no argument about this. And they can communicate with you, but you won't usually remember it. You'll just get the benefits of whatever's going on. And, and that will be your experience here. So always remember, the spirit guides change as you grow spiritually. It's just like a little kid grows out of their clothing as they get older. Same thing applies to spirit guides. And the higher self is always with you. You're not going to lose your higher self. You only have one higher self. It's perfect energy. It's the perfect part of you.
How many lives do you think a person needs to have before they can become a guide?
The average person, and this is not impressive, the average person has at least 1,000 past lives. Now, and that includes parallel lives, parallel universes. The reason why that's not impressive, originally you're supposed to have 2 lives. It's supposed to be a child, a mother, and a father. You can do that in 2 lives. But what happens is people just add insult to injury. They make mistakes. They violate karmic laws. They don't learn their karmic lessons. They do stupid things with all due respect, or they ignore the lessons, which is not a good idea either. And they just add karma on. Remember, it's their free will. They don't have to do that. They can actually be cool, but most people aren't. They just make mistakes. So you want to get out of the karmic cycle. But there is something called the principle of forgiveness that I report in my first book, Past Lives, Future Lives Revealed. And that is that, let's say that you've had, I don't care how many lives you've had, you've made the same mistake 100 times, and you're making the same mistake now. But all of a sudden, the higher self connects with you, and you say, hey, wait a minute. I'm not doing that anymore. I am going to correct this right now. So you know what the principle of forgiveness is? This is not about the New Testament. The principle of forgiveness says once you learn that lesson and are not doing it again, you've wiped out all the past experiences of that. You've wiped out all those karmic debts that were associated with that particular lesson. You see, that's the principle of forgiveness. And that allows you to ascend. Because if it wasn't for that, nobody would ever ascend. There's way too much karma. There's way too many lives. You would be overwhelmed. It would be like a toddler trying to get a PhD in astrophysics. Okay. There's no way that would happen. So the principle of forgiveness is a natural, universal law that allows us to wipe out karma quickly and to move towards the ascension cycle.
I understand that in order to have a more meaningful incarnation, you can't remember your past lives or anything else. But how are you supposed to learn lessons if you don't remember what you're supposed to be learning while you're here?
Well, okay, it's very simple. Remember, the higher self knows all the lessons. Okay, so you're right. Most people, when they're born, they reincarnate. They pretty much wipe the slate clean as far as now. Children between 2 and 5. If you read the research of Professor Ian Stevenson, the late professor from University of Virginia, Charlottesville, he spent 50 years doing this. Between 2 and 5, children will actually have memories of past lives. Not everyone. So I always tell to a parent, if you got a child between 2 and 5, sit down with them. Don't make believe you're playing a game with them, and just simply say, tell me what it was like when you were big. Very simple. And you'd be surprised what the answers are. And some of these could be documents, very interesting. And they have been over the years. All right. So, but your higher self knows that, your spirit guides knows that. And if you are supposed to know something, you will get it. Now, when it comes to me doing regressions, I don't do regressions or progressions unless I'm in a workshop. I'd rather do the superconscious mind tap because the knowledge of a past life regression is not therapeutic. It's like watching the History Channel. It doesn't do anything. In order to solve a problem, you want to raise energy. And you know how you raise energy? You access the higher self. Because your soul's energy is low, the higher self is perfect, and you can't lower energy. Once you raise energy to a certain, let's say, baseline, we call that, a frequency vibrational rate is the technical term, then you can't lower it. Because if you did, you never ascend and people just kill each other. So the higher self is perfect. So let me give you an example. Let's say your soul's level is 25, okay? And let's say you're dealing with an issue that's 30 on the scale, but 100 is perfect. That's your higher self. So if you're below the 30, you're going to lose. You're going to be victimized by whatever that is, whatever that issue is. But if you connect with your higher self by doing a super conscious mind tap, the higher self is never going to be low. It's always 100 or perfect here, but it can raise you up to 35, let's say. Now you're above that 30 issue, whatever that was, and now you are permanently, not just this life, including future lives, you are done with that issue. Whatever that was, it's ancient history. And that's what the higher self does. That's what a superconscious mind tap does. I call this cleansing when you're raising the frequency vibrational rate of your soul's energy. But I'd like to discuss some of the cases here about people who've had spirit guide contact, if we can here. So these are pretty heavy. These are real patients of mine. So I'm going to call her name Marissa, not her real name. She's a 18-year-old senior in high school in Southern California. She's a virgin. Think of it this way, okay? She doesn't date well. Doesn't have a strong social networking. She's kind of introverted, very insecure. And her only friend, her best friend, her only friend is, I'll call her Clarissa. Clarissa is a very negative, creepy young teenager. She wants to demoralize Marissa. All right, think about it. She says, "Oh, you're too goody two shoes," that kind of thing. And Clarissa, of course, is just a really bad seed. All right, so it's Christmas time, and Clarissa says to Marissa, "Hey, look, I'm having a Christmas party in Palm Springs, and I'd like to invite you." And she says, "I don't like a lot of people in a big party." She goes, "Oh, no, no, it's only going to be a few friends. There won't be more than 6 people there," which, of course, is a lie, as you'll see. She goes, "Okay." So she goes down there. Now, there's about 150 people in this big house in Palm Springs. There's drugs all over the place. This is Animal House. And she walks in, she doesn't know what to do. And Clarissa says, "I want you to come into the den. I've got a special gift for you." A Christmas present, right? She goes, "Okay." So she goes in there, they lock the door, and there's 2 guys. I call them Todd and James, not their real name. They're teenagers. And they look at her and say, "Marissa, we understand you're a virgin. You're not going to be a virgin very long." They're going to. Now she's freaking out. Okay. She doesn't know what to do. So all of a sudden, there's a knock at the door. "The police department, open up." Okay. Now people are flushing the drugs down the toilet. They're running out of the back rooms, out of the windows. Everybody's scrambling, right? So she goes to the front door, and there's an officer in a uniform. He says, young lady, come with me. So I'm going to walk you to your car. The guy saved her life. So she memorizes the badge number and the number of the car. The vehicle had a car number for the police department. This is in Palm Beach County, or Palm Spring County. So she goes home. That's a Sunday. She goes home. And then the following day, she thinks, I want to call the police department and thank that officer because I saw his badge number, I saw his name, and I just want to thank him because he really saved me. So she calls the police department, and the dispatcher says, well, what's his name? And she gives him a name and gave him the badge number and the number of the car. And she goes, we have absolutely no records of that. There's nobody by that name. There's no car by that number. So I don't know what you're talking about, young lady, but that person doesn't exist. That was a spirit guide. Okay. Now, later on, I worked with Marissa. She became more empowered. She met a young man later on, about 2 years later. They got married, and they are the proud parents of a son and a daughter. So Marissa has a good life. Not due to me, due to her spirit guide. So there's a case where this man, I call him Sam, not his real name. He lives in Los Angeles in kind of a bad neighborhood, like South Central Los Angeles. And he would go to the bodega to get something, go shopping. And he would go back to his apartment. He didn't have a lot of money. He was in a poor neighborhood. And so everything was fine, except one particular day. He's on the way back to his apartment from like a 7-Eleven or some store to get some shopping. And there's 3 guys coming up to him. And they pull a knife. And the guy says, we are going to take your groceries. We're going to take whatever money you have. And we are going to hurt you. Now, Sam is panicking. He doesn't know what to do. And he sits there and he just, so all of a sudden, a man appears 6.5 feet tall, right in front between him and the muggers. Doesn't know where it came from. He just appears. And the 3 guys look at this guy. He just stares at him and he says, leave. And the 3 guys just run away. Sam is on his way back to his apartment. But before he did, he turned around to thank the guy who immediately disappeared, just like that. That was a spirit guide, okay? It was not a human being per se. Disappeared into the 5th dimension. Remember, they go through these wormholes and these tears in the 5th dimension. That's how they travel from the 5th dimension to the 3rd dimension. So those are examples of something. Now, there are some famous ones. One of my favorite ones is William Blake. William Blake was an artist and poet in the 18th and 19th century, and he developed these copper engravings for his books. And how did he do this? William Blake's brother, Robert, died several years before he developed this technique. And Robert became a spirit guide to William and taught him how to do these copper engravings. Okay. So he did. And of course, he became very famous for that. But what was interesting about William Blake is that he also had these spirit guides that he called the immortals that would assist him in his creativity. And then he had this thing called the Hall of Los, is this place he would go to, which you'll see is the causal plane. And in the Hall of Los, there'd be these statues. And when you stare at the statues, they would be animated and they would represent your past lives. Now, what's significant about that is the causal plane is the origin of our Akashic records. So what he was talking about, without using the words, is the causal plane. And that was William Blake. Now, Robert Louis Stevenson is even kind of more fun. Robert Louis Stevenson, when he was a child, was affected by nightmares. He would couldn't go to sleep. Every time he'd go to sleep, he would have a vicious nightmare, lower astral entities, and he didn't know what to do. His parents couldn't deal with him, so he just said, I'm going to make up stories to get me to go to sleep, like counting sheep, except they were real stories. But he didn't know what to do. So he had these little beings that he called the brownies. Those were his spirit guides. And they would help him create these stories. And as he grew up as an adult, the brownies stayed with him. And one of the stories that the brownies gave him was the strange case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, which is what Robert Louis Stevenson is known for. So you see how these are creativity guides. They can help you create. There's another experiment or scientific study that's been done about creative people and scientists. Most creative instincts like the aha moment, great scientific discoveries, as well as artistic achievements or brilliant, art changing, sculpting, writing, whatever. 80% of them occur in the dream levels at night. Those are scientific studies. Okay. Well, why? Because when you go to sleep at night in the REM cycle or dream levels, you are in the fifth dimension. Your higher self can communicate with you. Your spirit guides can communicate with you. Even time travel, small future can communicate with you. And that's where you get your creativity. I'm known for developing the superconscious mind tap and progression therapy. Both of those techniques, which I'm very well known for, were developed during the REM cycle at night. Another example of it, not complicated. So this is why, because we're not worried about things, we're not thinking about earth plane problems, we're able to connect with our higher self directly. And that's where the dream levels at night and the higher self connection is all I care about. The dream levels and the fifth dimension is just as real as this one, except the physical laws are different. You can float, you can teleport, you can fly, you can read people's minds, you can do all kinds of fun things that you can't do here. You can have blue breath coming out of your mouth, okay? You can do all that, but you can't do that here. So that's why people think it's not a fantasy. It's not psychological meanderings. It's not wishful thinking. The fifth dimension is real, and we can prove it from quantum mechanics and astrophysics. So it is real, and we can use it to grow spiritually. And that's why I love these techniques, because it allows people to grow spiritually by being empowered and by being able to do it themselves with minimal training from me. Minimal.
Do you think you're ready to graduate and next time you will become a guide?
Well, I can't promise that, but yes, I like my techniques. I have Ascension training programs too. I have a whole album on Ascension training. So I know what I'm doing. And there's only one thing that keeps you from Ascension. Remember, the universe only has two emotions. One is unconditional love. You get that from your higher self, spirit guides, angels, etc. Or a dog. Okay, I recommend miniature schnauzers. Okay, and the other emotion is fear, and fear causes all the problems. So when people cross into spirit, because they're brainwashed by society, religion, corporations, they're always trying. Oh, death is bad. You got to stay alive as long as you can. Actually, no, you don't have control over that. So if you overcome the fear of death, thanophobia, as we technically refer to it, then you're ready for ascension. Now, of course, you want to learn your karmic lessons. You want to do unto others, practice a spiritual life. No problem. That's what I do. So when it comes to the end of life, I'm not going to have any fear. I'm going to merge with my higher self. We call that conscious dying. It's a whole different technique where at the moment of death, you merge with your higher self. Let me illustrate it. So let's say I'm going to use my fist. This fist, this is my right fist. You look at your left because you got a camera here. This fist represents the subconscious. Now, at the moment of death now, this is my higher self. The higher self will always be with you at the moment of death, right? What you want to do is this: merge with the higher self. Then you go all the way to the soul plane, which is beyond the karmic cycle. It's sort of like a DMZ. It's not the lower planes of the karmic cycle. It's not the higher planes. It's where you reincarnate from or where you ascend from. And when you do the merging, that's called conscious dying. Great. That's how you ascend. It's an old technique. It's quoted by Plato, goes back to the mystery schools, etc. It's thousands of years old. Now, what most people do is this. At the moment of death, because of fear, they do this. They separate and they go to the lower astral plane where they can spend a lot of time there. You don't want to be there. And then eventually they go to the soul plane, but now they didn't learn their karmic lessons. They got more lessons to deal with. They've got to have another life. And it's going to be usually a dysfunctional one, more so than the previous one, because you got to add up the interest and penalties of all the things you didn't do. So you don't want to do that. And that's called unconscious dying. Okay. So conscious dying is the good one. Unconscious is the bad one. And I am going to do it. I can't promise it, but oh yeah, I don't really fear of death. My attitude is that I'm not looking forward to it, but to me, it's a change of dimensions. I believe in reincarnation. I have a very positive attitude towards it. Fear of death or any kind of fear is what you want to eliminate because it's only bad news. 90% of what people fear of, like we call that anxiety, never happen. They just create all kinds of stress, which is unnecessary. My attitude is that we got free will, we've got a higher self, and if we were supposed to be extinct as a species, we would have been extinct hundreds of thousands of years ago. So we're supposed to be here.
So when you die, if you see the light, you want to go to it because the light is your higher self.
Right. Now, this is what happens. This is interesting. So when patients of mine go to sleep at night, and even when they use my techniques, you can't win them all. You're not always going to eliminate the lower astral plane. So they go to the lower astral plane, maybe for one of their one of their sleep cycles. You have like 4 or 5 sleep cycles throughout the night. It's a 4-stage cycle. Stage 4 is the REM cycle. And so they go into the lower astral plane. They know it's a bad neighborhood. Okay. They know the characteristics, but there's the light and the tunnel in front of them. Now, if they're not trained by people like me or they don't do a lot of reading, they're going to say, I don't know what that is. That's going to take me to hell. Isn't that what people think? So they ignore it and they stay on the lower astral. So I train my patients, if they go to the lower astral, and they will occasionally, I say, go into the light, go into the tunnel. It's going to zip you up to the upper astral plane, just like an escalator at a mall. And then you are now no longer in the lower astral, no more psychic attack. Nobody can bother you. You're with your higher self and spirit guides or whatever the higher self wants to work with you at that time. So yes, you don't want to have, remember, fear is what people have, and that's what keeps them away from the light. The light is positive. It represents the entity at the end of a life is usually your higher self.
A topic that's on YouTube now is that reincarnation is forced and we are trapped here over and over again. And some people believe that you shouldn't go to the light, but go to the black void. What are your thoughts on that?
Okay, well, maybe they should study Gnosticism to see what's going on here. Basically, the black void, just think of it logically. Black usually represents evil and white represents good, right? The white light, not a black light, it's a white light. And this is not a racial thing, so folks, please don't give me those emails, okay? The A void is like going into outer space. You know, it's cold, it's dark, and you're going to die. You're going to freeze to death. The white light, the tunnel, the white light is there to guide you. It's beautiful. So I don't know who did that YouTube thing. Whoever it is, I guarantee you one thing: either he is a Satanist or he's just a really negative camper who believes that life sucks and then you die. That's one of those people. That's what that represents because he doesn't understand metaphysics. It's not just my work, my 21 books on this. It's thousands of metaphysical books. It goes back to the Theosophical Society. It goes back to the mystery schools. It's not complicated. It really isn't. Here's a good example. Let me give you a good example of the white light from ancient times. Plato in Book 10 of the Republic, book 1 through 9 are kind of boring. Book 10 is great. So in book 10, there's a guy named He was a soldier named E.R. That's his name. And he died in battle. So, of course, you're a hero when you die in battle, right? So they're going to have a big funeral pyre where they have him at the top of this, all the wood, you know, trees, stumps and everything. And they put his body at the top of it. And they're going to have a ritual because mystery schools had fire ceremonies. That was real big with them. And then they're going to light the fire and they're going to burn his body. And they're going to have a ritual ceremony to wish him well in the next life, whatever, right? So they're doing that. They're getting ready to light the fire. All of a sudden, comes up, stands up and says, whoa, what's going on? Okay. So he obviously had a coma. He wasn't dead. They didn't understand the difference. They bring him down from the funeral pyre and they said, what happened? And they said, I saw the light. I entered the white light. Plato is reporting the first near-death experience 2,300 years ago. It wasn't a black void. Whatever YouTube guy, get a life, okay? Learn something. Get some positivity in your life. The black void will never work. It would be like going into a black hole. You can't escape from a black hole. Not even light can escape from a black hole. So I have a problem with that that podcast or that whatever that guy is doing. And by the way, nobody else does that. Everybody else talks about the white light and the positivity. So he's in a minority of one. Okay.
I was looking at your website and there's something on there about meeting people from the future, and you kind of touched on it earlier. Can you give us a little preview about that?
Sure, because we're going to do more details on that. These are time travelers from our future. These are people that are human beings, just like us, from 1,000 to 3,000 years in the future. I call them chrononauts. They come back in time through a wormhole, like a wormhole linear accelerator, the mechanics, which we'll discuss shortly or later on. And they're here to help us. They're here to help us because if we mess up our society, we have nuclear wars or plagues and all kinds of stuff, they don't exist if we kill each other off. So they have the vested self-interest in helping us technologically and spiritually. They're very positive, they're very smart, very technological. That's where we get our technology from. Think of it. Look at the technology of the last, I'll say, 100 years. And then go back. Why did we do this in the Renaissance? Or the Age of Enlightenment, or the Golden Age of Greece? They have some of the most brilliant minds in history. Archimedes, one of the most brilliant scientists and mathematicians ever. Hero from Rome. He developed the steam engine 2,000 years ago. Why didn't they do that? Because they didn't have a time traveler connection. And so anyway, they are people from the future, and you can connect with them. And if they are willing to have a communication with you, they will. And I train people to act. I met them myself, and I train people to do it. And they are called chrononauts, but they're all good. They are well trained. They're like astronauts, except they travel through time. So I call them chrononauts. Chronos means time in Greek. So yeah, time travels from our future are a real trip. They are here to help us, and they have given us our technology. ETs too, by the way, but definitely time travelers. And I'll talk about how they helped build the Pyramid of Giza, how anti-gravity crafts were used. I'll talk about all that. Their technology is absolutely brilliant.
Well, if people want to find out more about what you're up to and potentially communicate with you, should they go to your website?
Yes, you've got, if you haven't linked it, of course, it's www.dr for Dr. D as in David, R as in Robert, BruceGoldberg.com. And if they mention this podcast and they want to order the Spirit Guide Contact through Hypnosis book, they get the free CD to connect with Spirit Guides. If they order my Exploring the Fifth Dimension book, they want to go out of the body in the fifth dimension regularly, then they will get a free fifth dimensional travel CD, but they must mention the offer from your interview, your show, in order to do that. And they can email me, and there's lots of articles on there. I've got a YouTube channel with 55 videos on there, including a time traveler contactee, ET contactee. Jerry Springer's past life regression is on there, the late Jerry Springer. May he rest in peace. People have gone to past lives, future lives, and people who remove psychic attack on the air, interestingly enough. So there's a lot of fun stuff on there. And there's about 30 articles on there too. So, and all my books and CDs and everything is on there. So there's a lot of information and techniques on there that they can proceed by going there.
Before we wrap it up, can you leave us with a last positive message?
Okay. Basically, in your daily life, always have a positive mindset. You got nothing to lose. The energy you send out is what you get, the law of attraction. And connect with your higher self and do unto others, which is not a Christian principle. It goes back into metaphysics thousands of years before Christianity. In other words, you want to act spiritually. Don't be a hypocrite. Be kind, positive, connect with the higher self, be organized and disciplined in life, and keep away from the negative habits like drugs, gambling, all the usual things that people do. Just have a good, positive spiritual life, and you will find yourself having tremendous benefits beyond your wildest dreams.
Dr. Goldberg, thanks for your message, and thanks for being my guest again.
My pleasure. I look forward to reincarnating with you.
Thanks for watching the JeffMara podcast. I really appreciate you. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. And if you do, there are loyalty badges and other perks depending on your level of membership. All you need to do is click the join button underneath the video to find out more. Thank you for your support.